Something I get asked all the time is, but isn't my perfectionism a good thing? Doesn't it help me succeed? Doesn't it help me set my standards really high? Isn't perfectionism healthy? I think if we're watching this, we both know the answer is probably not. But what makes it unhealthy? At what point does it get from, this is okay, to like, this is really not good? Let's get into it. I'm Dr. Rebecca. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I really think that for most people, perfectionism is not healthy. There's a spectrum, right? This is not a yes or no question. Black and white, yes or no, all or nothing. That kind of framework rarely works for us, to be perfectly honest. And ultimately, I think there's probably a point where having high standards is nice, and then we start to get a little bit further into it's hurting us, and then we start to get to unhealthy, and then we get to really painful. I think that the simple answer is there are only 3 things that make something unhealthy, truly. It can actually be that simple. Also, I did a quick short about this a little while ago. I'll put that link in the comments down below. But there are 3 things that make something unhealthy. Number 1, is it hurting you? Number 2, is it preventing you from living the life that you want to live? Number 3, is it hurting other people? So how do we apply this to perfectionism? I think that there's a lot of different ways that perfectionism is okay in your life, and potentially a few different ways where it's hitting one of those 3 unhealthy markers, and it's really important to actually take a look at it. First, maybe it's gotten to the point where being perfectionistic is actually painful. It's actually hurting you. When we think about the definition of perfectionism, we're thinking about this like relentless striving for this unattainable level of excellence, right? Like actually hitting perfection, whatever that means. I don't think it really exists, so that's part of the problem here. That striving can feel really good and it can feel really motivating, but it can also start to make you feel really critical, really afraid of not hitting the mark. I think that self-criticism and that fear of failure is really hitting at the perfectionism is hurting you side of this. Whenever I think about perfectionism being really painful, I'm such a millennial. I think about that Jessie Spano moment, remember? In Saved by the Bell, and she's like trying to, I don't know, ace a test or something like that. And she's taking caffeine pills to stay up late and study. And she does that like, I'm so excited, I'm so scared. She's actually hurting herself trying to reach this unattainable level of perfection. And we can see it when we're sitting there like, as kids watching Saved by the Bell, we're like, Jessie, don't worry, it's gonna be fine. But when it really comes to ourselves, it doesn't feel like that's the case. It feels like maybe I really should take the caffeine pills and stay up late and try to attain this unattainable level of awesomeness. And we don't see until it reaches this breaking point how badly it can be hurting us. There's also this really kind of tricky bit of perfectionism where, let's say, the striving happens over and over and over again. It starts to dull our experience of success. There's symptoms of perfectionism that include things like difficulty experiencing joy or difficulty understanding how well we're doing, really seeing ourselves and allowing ourselves to have that, because we never actually reach perfection, but we can definitely reach good enough. We can often even reach excellence. But when it falls short of perfection, we don't let ourselves have the win. And first of all, heartbreaking, right? Secondly, you can see in that case how perfectionism is really hurting you and not allowing you to experience the joy of your life and of what you're doing. Number 2, a behavior is unhealthy when it's preventing you from living the life that you want to live. So for the first one, when we're thinking of whether a behavior is hurting us, there's really an immediacy to that, right? That is happening right now. In this moment, I am hurting. I think that that's different from this second piece. This is preventing me from living the life I want to live. It might not be hurting right now, but future me is suffering because I am not actually able to get to this next step. I'm blocked from progressing or evolving or achieving in ways that I hope to do. This one is so tricky because I think that a lot of people hold on to perfection, or perfectionism rather, with the idea that this current difficulty is in service of their future self. And in reality, there's so many times when it is preventing you from being the person you want to be or becoming the person that you want to become. A really small example of this is like perfectionists tend to have difficulty delegating. Like nobody can do it as well as I can, so I have to do everything. My ability to extend my reach is really limited because if I have to have my hand on every single bit of my work product, it's not gonna go very far. I'm just one person. Allowing that imperfect delegation to happen, fantastic for that. Procrastination is also a huge problem for perfectionists. For so many people, it feels really hard to start unless something is just right. I'm laughing because I have tried to make this video like 4 times. The first time my mic wasn't plugged in. The second time the lighting wouldn't work. Like so many things happen. And the problem with that, I think that the reason I get excited about perfectionism and helping people with perfectionism is because it's something I deal with too. And it's something I've worked really hard to work through. When we think about procrastination and perfectionism, you can see how much we're preventing ourselves from being the best version of ourselves in the future. We're not going for the project. We're not actually doing the thing. We're waiting and we're losing time, imagining that there's a better time in the future to start something, when honestly, the best time would have been like a year ago. The second best time is now. Just do it. Go for it, right? There's also a piece where the painful part of perfectionism, like the self-criticism, is starting to bleed into difficulty becoming that best future self. Being self-critical decreases motivation. There's like research on this. I'm not making this up. Being self-critical decreases motivation, it decreases confidence, and it decreases your resilience. It makes failure the last step. When honestly, if you're trying to do something big, failure is probably the first step and the second step and the 50th step. You need to fail over and over again until you succeed. But if you're self-critical, you can never learn from mistakes. You have to have self-compassion and resilience to be able to directly look at your mistakes, directly look at your failures, try to understand them, and try to be compassionate about them so that you can learn from them and do something better next time. In that way, being self-critical, being perfectionistic, and not allowing yourself to try or do anything if it's not perfect really prevents you from evolving at all, really prevents you from becoming the self that you want to be. The third factor we're talking about, a behavior is unhealthy if it's hurting other people. This seems weird. Perfectionism feels like it's very self-focused. It's a little bit easier to see why it might be hurtful to yourself. How is it hurting other people? One really direct way perfectionism can hurt other people is if it is other-oriented perfectionism. There are many types of perfectionism. I'll put a link to that below too. There's a video I made about that. The different types of perfectionism. One of them is called other-oriented, and it means I am not only perfectionistic about myself, I'm perfectionistic about the behavior of other people. And this becomes really salient when we think about people who are kind of like representing us in the world, people who are our proxies in the world, our partner, our kids, our employees, sometimes our best friend, right? Anybody who feels very connected to us, feeling intense fear about their failures and how it reflects on us, that can start to hurt other people. Your perfectionism can really hurt others if it's other-oriented. But even if your perfectionism is just about you, I do think it impacts your relationships. I think that a really big example of this here is perfectionism can encourage us to not be genuine with other people. Quick aside, there's a really simple equation for intimacy in friendships and relationships. Increase vulnerability, increase intimacy. Decrease vulnerability, decrease intimacy. That's it. Let me know if you want a video about that in the future. I think that's a fascinating concept and I'd love to go into it further if you're interested. Vulnerability is basically me saying, this is exactly how you can hurt me. Here you go. I trust that you're not gonna hurt me. Woo! If you're a perfectionist, the best way to hurt you is to tell you that you're imperfect, right? To tell you that you failed. And allowing somebody else to hold that vulnerability is intense and it probably feels awful, but not allowing them to hold it decreases the intimacy in your relationship. So even if your perfectionism is just about you, it's impacting your relationships, probably. So that's it, guys. Those are the 3 factors that make anything, any behavior unhealthy. And I think we can see that it really can apply for a lot of people in their perfectionistic behavior too. But I'm curious, do you see it working that way for you? Is that coming up for you too? Do you notice perfectionism hurting you, preventing you from living the life you want to live, hurting other people in your life? Is it not? Are there other behaviors that you're starting to look at through this healthy versus unhealthy lens? Let me know below in the comments. If you're interested in more videos about perfectionism, click right over here. I think you'll like this one, and click here to subscribe. Thanks, y'all. Have a good one. Where is that line for everybody? That's just repetitive. Also, I did a quick short about this a little while ago, so you can click. I'm gonna put the. There's symptoms of I get so excited about this. It's so intense. It's so huge. But I'm curious. I have hiccups. I forgot how to say goodbye.